Well, let's jump into chapter 2 today, and a lot of good stuff in this chapter. Chapter 1, I mean, it feels like a month, but it's just been a couple of weeks. Chapter 1, we kind of dug in, and it sets the tone for what we're going to be learning throughout the Proverbs, and predominantly what we're focusing on is wisdom. Learning the wisdom of God, learning to seek the wisdom of God, learning to run from things that aren't of God. A lot of good stuff in chapter 1. And then it personified wisdom in chapter 1, verses 20 and on down towards the end, of as if wisdom was a person, and how wisdom maybe responds to our lack of seeking it out or our embracing of it. And it was quite interesting reading there from verse 20 down to the end of chapter 1. And chapter 2 is just going to kind of take this a step further and encourage us in the pursuit of wisdom, of trying to seek wisdom out. That's kind of what the whole thought is today. I've kind of titled this one Seeking God, because we can, as we're pursuing wisdom, it's talking about not the wisdom of this world, but godly wisdom and wisdom that can help us in basically any situation. So if we read we'll read the first few verses and then we'll kind of dig in. Again, the writer is who? Solomon, right? And he's writing as if he's writing to his son. We kind of conclude with all of his wives and girlfriends that he had at least one kid somewhere along the way. So he may be writing to his actual son. We're not 100% sure on that. But he's speaking as if he is writing to someone who needs to learn. And that's all of us, regardless of our age. We need to continue to be willing to learn. So he says, "My son, if thou wilt receive my words and hide my commandments with thee, so that thou incline thine ear unto wisdom, and apply thine heart to understanding. Yea, if thou criest after knowledge, and liftest up your voice for understanding, if you seekest her meaning wisdom, her as silver, and searcheth for her as for hid treasures, then," kind of like he's made this big grand opening statement, "if you'll do these things, then shalt thou understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God." We learned in verse 7 of chapter 1 that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The fools despise wisdom and instruction. So he's kind of following up on what he's already stated in chapter 1. And wisdom is something, kind of our lesson points out today, that wisdom is something that needs to be sought after. It's something that we need to pursue. It's not something that just you wake up one day and, oh, I'm wise now. No, it's something that you actively are pursuing and trying to understand. We notice that wisdom, again, is personified here in the last two in chapter 1 and chapter 2. It seems to be they've given it a personal characteristic. In the New Testament, what we see is wisdom is not merely personified, but it is really a person of Jesus. I mean, Jesus is ultimately the wisdom that we should seek. And in Colossians chapter 2, and parts of the last part of verse 2 in chapter 3, it mentions Jesus, or Christ, in whom are hid all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. So this is cool that we see this still talked about in the New Testament, that in Christ, we see the word treasures being talked about here in Proverbs, and Colossians 2 says that all the treasures are hid in Christ, of whom wisdom and knowledge is what that treasure is. So Jesus really is the person of wisdom in the New Testament. So when we talk about seeking wisdom, which we're doing here in chapter 1, chapter 2, and even in chapter 3, we are ultimately talking prophetically, really, about seeking Christ. I mean, that's what we should be doing today. Not only seeking wisdom as if it's a person, but seeking the person who is wisdom, who we can learn, of course, the ultimate lessons from. Now, we're not talking about, again, seeking worldly wisdom, as most people try to portray it in our lives today. But we're seeking the things of God. We're talking about Jesus being our wisdom, Jesus being the ultimate person we want to learn and to know. So we want to keep that kind of in mind as we go through. So at times when we study things out like this, we can sometimes get caught up in what did it mean in the day that it was written. When we study the Old Testament, we're like, well, what did it mean to them? Well, we really need to apply this is what does it mean to us now, in our day? It meant something to them, yes, but it still means something. It should mean something to us today. And one question I think I've been trying to apply as I study through this, and that we should all keep in mind, is how do we apply these same wisdom-based things taught 3,000 years ago to our current circumstances today in 2024? How can we? And there's infinite ways we can apply it. I mean, this is just as relevant to me today as it was to the people reading it 3,000 years ago when it was penned down. This is really the purpose of studying this book, is how do we apply this stuff to our lives. And that's how I try to teach. I hope I come across that way of no matter what book we're studying, how does it relate to us now? How can we apply to this now? How can this help us right now in our walk with God today? So as we move through this chapter in particular and the next chapter, we're going to run into, and we've already seen them here, a lot of action words. We've seen this already in the 4 verses that I read. We see a lot of action terms, action phrases, and when we read verses 1 through 5, one word that kind of sticks out to me, not necessarily a word literally in the text, but a concept, is effort. Effort seems to be what this is talking about. How much effort are we putting into seeking after wisdom, seeking after God? The effort is going to really reflect the effect of this stuff into our lives. And if we look at these verses, one of the first action words we see in verse 1 is receive. If you will receive my words and hide my commandments with thee. There's 3 things that we can do when someone tries to tell you something or express something to you. We can either receive it, we can reject it, or we can just ignore it and dismiss it. And I've seen people do that. I've done that throughout my life. Some things we used to say it goes in one ear and out the other, right? And it feels like that's the case for a lot of students, younger people especially. But as we get kind of complacent and get in our place of comfort, we sit week after week through church services and hear sermons, and I'm sure there's times where, I've felt that way as a pastor, that it's just going in one ear and out the other, or everybody that talks to you after the church feels like you were talking to somebody else. Cheryl, he's mentioned that in his sermons, that one person said it has something to do with anyway, it ended up this one person was there in the church by themselves that service. It was like a storm or something that happened, and the preacher preached the same type of stuff because he's preaching to this one person all this time. And this person says, "You really talked to him today? You really got him today?" Well, that was the only person in the service that day, and they said the same thing. Said, "If they were here, you would have really got through to them today." And that's the person that he's really trying to get through to. Sometimes that can be us. We can be just reading and just perusing through and not really absorbing or understanding.
Kind of like David was the man at you.
It's you, exactly. You're the man, and that wasn't a good thing. He was saying, you're the problem here.
You're the man.
You're the one that's caused all these issues. So that's the first thing we see is receiving. We've got to be willing to receive what God is trying to say to us. How can we do that? Well, that's a good question. How can we intentionally receive what God is trying to say to us?
The preparation through your prayers, your studies, things that you're asking for discernment.
Right.
You're willing to. You increase your willingness, I guess is
I
what
guess
I'm
that's where the effort comes in
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, that effort. I mean, you've got to be prepared to receive it. You prepare your heart to be open, clear things out of your life, out of your mind. Really focus on, okay, what is God trying to tell me through this passage? You know,
And it's, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there's a whole lot of, like you said before, action words.
yeah.
Accept my words.
Mhm.
Store up my commands. Turn your ear to wisdom. Apply your heart to understanding. Call out for insight. Cry out
Absolutely.
loud. Look for. I mean, it's telling you that, you know.
Absolutely. These are all very intentional actions that we can take. Do what? Hmm?
The verbs.
Verbs, there you go. Our English major over
And
here.
I'm taking grammar and usage right now. I've been talking about verbs all week, and I have verbs.
What was you going to say, Greg?
Oh, I was just, he commands that we go out and search and study and do things like that, but also ask for, pray for that discernment, because God will give it to you.
Sure. Absolutely.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
You know, applying it in my life as a teacher, you know, it's hard to get through to students when this is in their hand, or they've got an earbud in their ear, or they're doing other things on the computer that they're supposed to be doing their work on. You know, I use a lot of electronics, but I see this, and this happened to me, and I see it happening to a lot of people in churches. They're like, oh, I use my Bible app on my phone. Well, they'll be following along or reading, and then all of a sudden a notification pops up. And I'm like, oh, what was that? And then before too long, they're texting somebody or scrolling through social media or whatever, and it's totally lost focus. You know, so trying to clear our minds of a lot of that sort of stuff is important so that we can receive. And then it goes on to say, hide my commandments with thee. Or treasure up my commandments is where I think some of the other versions put it, to treasure things up. Verse 2 says to incline your ear, or making your ear attentive, focusing on what it's trying to say. There's action words here: listening, engaging, absorbing. These are intentional things. Applying your heart to understanding. Just to really dig into this. That's what it says right here in the second part of verse 2. Apply thine heart to understanding. Verse 3 says to cry out, or to call out. If you criest after knowledge. We see scenes, in movies where, lovers are chasing after each other and one's trying to leave. Says, no, don't leave me. I think of Titanic, where Rose and whatever his name was is, in the water. I'll never let go. I'll never let go. She's crying after him. That's the way we ought to be with wisdom. That's the way we ought to be with God. It's crying after, just desperately trying to seek Him and cling to Him. That's what this is talking about. Cry after knowledge and lift up your voice for understanding, asking God to give it to us. What Greg was saying, just actually asking God to give us the understanding and discernment that we're looking for. Verse 4, I love this verse. It says, if you seekest her. So her, again, is wisdom. If we tie that back to chapter 1, verse 20, It says, wisdom crieth out, she uttereth her voice in the streets. She cried in the chief place of concourse. It's personified in a female gender. So here in chapter 2, where he says, if you seekest her, it's meaning wisdom. Seekest her as silver, and searchest for her as for hidden treasures. Anybody ever been treasure hunting of any kind? I mean, it's a process. You're trying to you're just blindly walking around with a little metal detector or whatever. My dad, he still does, takes his metal detector to the beach, and he's just up and down the beach, beep, 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 trying to find something. And it's like just this endless search, and you end up, maybe getting a penny or a nickel or a bottle cap or, or something. One of my favorite shows in the past few years is a newer show called Duck Family Treasure. And it's Jeff Robertson and Jace Robertson, all the people from the Duck Dynasty show, except for Willie's not on there. Phil, I think, makes an appearance. They all make a small appearance, but it's mainly Jace and Cy and Jeff, and they got another guy.
You're pretty well versed in this thing.
Yeah, I've watched it. I've been a big Duck Dynasty fan forever. When Joy was a small girl, we would watch that show.
I dressed up as Cy Robertson one year.
Yeah, they've made quite an impact on us. But watching that show, you see the highlights of when they find something and all that. But Jace talks about the behind the scenes of, you don't realize how many hours and hours and hours of filming that we put into that. And we only show you like 5 minutes of it. Those are the things that we find. But it's just, you're just out there all day long, searching and searching and searching. It takes a lot of effort to seek and to search out that kind of treasure. And when they find something, they're super excited about, man, look what we found. And some things they find, they're like, oh, this is just, something dumb. But then sometimes they'll find some really nice coins, or they'll find bullets or things from the Civil War and all these sorts of things. And they're very excited about what they found, but it's not easy. It's not just, it's right out there in front of you, go pick it up. It's something that you have to learn to do. It's something you have to lean into. And that's the way seeking wisdom from God is. It's something you really have to learn how to do. Be patient in your search. As an immature believer, I would be like, putting out the fleece kind of person. God, just show me. As I'm driving to work, if you want me to do this, show me a purple cow on the side of the road, or, whatever. It's like, make it obvious to me. But that's not how it is. We have to learn to seek out the discernment, to learn to seek out the wisdom, and really put forth the effort and the patience that it's going to take to really, truly do what verse 5 tells us to do. So verse 5 says, if you will receive, hide, incline, apply, criest out, lift up your voice, seek, and search, then shalt thou understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. There's the two things that it says we'll be able to do. So what does it mean to understand the fear of the Lord? What does that mean to you? Because that's one of the things that we need to accomplish through our search, is understanding the fear of the Lord.
You'll submit to Him, which is
Okay.
kind of the same thing as understanding the fear. Like, He gave you this life. He can give and take away through your newfound knowledge, and you're just submitting to
So
His.
learning to yield to His authority
Yeah.
and His dominance in our life. That's definitely a good way of putting the fear of the Lord, is understanding who He is versus who we are. And a lot of people don't ever get that. They think we're what it's all about. The money that I'm making is what it's all about. The career. I was watching. Anybody watch the Lakers and Warriors game last night? Me and Joe was up till 12:30 or whatever it was, watching that. They went into double overtime. Of course, our team that Joe's on, that I coach, is the Warriors. So we were kind of interested just because of that. Plus, Stephen Curry's on the team. Joe likes him. But it was the first time since 1969 that they've gone into double overtime in a game of this caliber. But I was sitting there watching, and I know some of the players through other shows. We watch Tanked, where they build these big fish tanks for all these famous rich people, and they've made tanks for the Davis player. I don't think LeBron's got one, but Shaq and all that. But you see these people and inside their houses and a little bit inside their life of what is important to them, and it's not this, necessarily. I'm not going to make a complete judgment on everybody's heart that's a famous person, but most of them, they seek their treasures out for the things that they can hold in their hands. The stuff, the Lamborghinis, the fish tanks, the mansions, the money, and all that sort of stuff. Very few people truly seek out the real treasure, and that is what the Word of God is and the wisdom of God. So understanding the fear of the Lord, something that unfortunately I think the majority of the world doesn't ever get. They think they're supposed to be scared of God because of the way that is worded, and that's not true either. It's a reverence and learning to submit and learning to yield your life to Him as the ultimate authority. And to find the knowledge of God, that's a tough one for me. To find the knowledge of God. This tells us that this is what we'll be able to do. So, what does that mean to me? How do you find the knowledge of God? What is the knowledge of God? Okay, the Bible, the things found within it.
I think it's a realization of who God is and who we really ain't.
Right. Who God is and who we ain't.
That's
That's right.
You stop and think about it, and He's given us just about whatever you want.
Absolutely.
Life, all down the heart.
So does anyone happen to know, this is a very well-known verse in the Bible, what Luke 19:10 says, without looking at it?
Look quick.
So Luke 19:10, it states the reason why Jesus came to this planet. So why did Jesus come to earth?
Say the word.
To seek and to save that which is lost, is what Luke 19:10 says. I like the tie-in here. What did Jesus come to do? To seek and to save. To seek us out. To make Himself known to us. Kind of like our treasure hunting thought. He came to seek us out and to reveal who He is. I can imagine all the things that He has learned about us in that process. There's a lot of things you learn when you're treasure hunting, and what works, what doesn't work, how to be, again, patient, how to work through frustration. That's some of the knowledge that God has towards us. Think of how frustrated He must get with us at times. We've been reading about it in Acts, and especially Romans, where He was just all day long, I stretched out my arms to you, I've called out to you, and you haven't even acknowledged who I am. So those are some of the things that God has learned about us. Kind of wild to think about, to have and find the knowledge of God. He spends that much time and effort seeking after us. Shouldn't we do the same? Spend that much time and effort seeking after Him and His wisdom and His knowledge. Again, can you imagine all that God knows by now about us and about how we think or don't think? What is it that distracts us from God? What is it that deters us off the straight and narrow path? What is it about? He's learned so much about us that we probably couldn't ever even learn about ourselves. We're just not maybe even capable. But the main thing that we can learn through that is God is ready and willing to respond to our effort. He's always there waiting and willing to receive us. And the Bible even says that God is not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. It's one thing we can learn about Him and about His knowledge of us is, despite ourselves, He's always ready and willing to receive us. We hear the story of the prodigal son. That's God. No matter where we've gone, what we've got into, what we've wasted, what we've squandered, He's ready to run out and meet us and receive us back in every situation. That's pretty awesome. God wants to pour out His wisdom on us. Unfortunately, way more than you and I want to receive it sometimes. He wants to give it to us more than we want to receive it. And that's one of the first action words given to us in chapter 2 is if you'll receive my words. We've got to be willing to receive what God is trying to bestow upon us. And when we think about how much of our lives are spent on putting that kind of effort in to God versus putting into other things, it's kind of a sobering thought. If we think about, do we spend more time in our life seeking after God or just focused on other things? And if we're honest with ourselves, I'd say it's more other things. The amount of time and effort that people put in social media. Some people live on that screen. Some people are making millions of dollars on that screen. Just making YouTube channels and content. People are subscribing and they're getting, advertisement deals and all that sort of stuff and making all kinds. They just live for this kind of thing, and they spend their whole life. The average screen time for teenagers, middle school and high school, is somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 12 hours a day, is what they've said.
How do you have time for
Yeah.
exercise?
Nobody exercises. They barely eat. They just sit there. I know Joe's just as bad. He'll eat while staring at his computer screen. He'll sit there and he's on his Fortnite games, and I'll say, how much time do we spend on things like that? And even multitasking, that's what it is, right? Yeah, he's just good at doing multiple things at once. But we'll spend that kind of time on social media, video games, watching TikTok videos, or just watching TV, or just doing other things. Think about if we spent that kind of time and effort seeking after God, how much more of a difference that would make, and how much more wise we would be, the kind of wisdom that we would attain if we seek after God, incline our ear, incline our minds to Him, searching for God and wisdom, but the kind of effort it takes to seek out and find hidden treasure. A lot of people are patient out there with those metal detectors, trying to search and spend hours and hours and hours a day just to get a few little nuggets. Well, that's how we should be reading the Bible. Even if we just get one or two things here and there, we've received something. And again, it takes a lot of effort. Imagine how much we would understand, as verse 5 says, and know God if we would spend that kind of effort into seeking after Him. Let's look at what verses 6 through 8 say, and then we'll finish this thing out. So, verse 6 says, "For the Lord giveth wisdom. Out of His mouth cometh knowledge and understanding. He layeth up sound wisdom for the righteous. He is a buckler to them that walk uprightly." He's the reason these things are possible. "He keepeth the paths of judgment and preserveth the way of His saints." Again, He's the reason blessings come. He's the reason that we're able to understand and accomplish things. He's the reason for blessings in our life and good things that come our way. "He keepeth the paths of judgments and preserveth the way of the saints. Then shalt thou understand righteousness." That's a topic, if you just ask any random person on the street, what is righteousness? I wonder how many people would even be able to begin to explain that. But he says that if we'll do these things and allow Him to be these things for us, then we will understand righteousness, we will understand judgment. Here's that word equity again. We'll understand equity. That was mentioned early on in chapter 1, verse 3. The purpose of a proverb, according to chapter 1, verse 3, is to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, and judgment, and equity. Is those not the same things we're talking about over here in chapter 2 in this verse? Then, if we do all these things, if we let him be these things to us, then you'll understand righteousness, judgment, equity, yea, every good path. So if we want to be in that place, what do we got to do? We got to receive. We got to seek. We got to hide. We got to incline our ear. Apply our hearts. Cry after knowledge. Lift up our voice for understanding. Seek God and wisdom as if we're seeking silver and searching for hidden treasures. We may complain to say, man, I wish I knew more about God. But have we done everything in the first 4 verses here? Do we really spend our time and energy focused on those sort of things? Thoughts before we conclude. We're going to go quickly through the rest of the verses that will tell us the effect of these things in our lives. You may got any thoughts or questions or statements before we do that?
That the translation of righteousness in the NIV version says, then you will understand what is right and just and fair.
What is right and just and fair? And again, that's what equity means, is fairness. Right and just and fair, I like that. So verses 10 down to 21 tells us this will be kind of the ultimate effect of doing the things the way we're supposed to be doing it. When wisdom entereth into your heart, and knowledge is pleasant unto thy soul, discretion shall preserve thee, and understanding shall keep thee. We've used that word discretion a lot. You know, I asked, what does it look like to be a mature and a wise Christian? Discretion was one of the words that came up, of learning what to do and what not to do in any given situation. Whew, that's tough. And that's a learned thing. I've done the opposite a lot of years of my life, of not having that understanding and that discretion that I should have done. To deliver you from the way of the evil man, from the man that speaketh froward things. So again, we'll have this kind of wisdom and knowledge. We're not going to be as likely to go into the ways of evil people. We're not going to be likely to fall at the words of froward things. What's froward? That's a weird word. You don't see that much very often these days. Froward. Perverse. Things that are wrong. Things that are going the wrong direction. Froward just means not the way. It's kind of the opposite of moving forward. Moving froward means you're just going all over the place and you're not moving forward. Is kind of the way I've always thought of that. Who leave the paths of uprightness, who walk in the ways of darkness. Again, we're going to be delivered from these things. We're going to be delivered from, verse 14, those who rejoice to do evil and delight in the, here's that word again, frowardness of the wicked, whose ways are crooked, and they froward and their paths. So, to have the wisdom and knowledge that we need to have, it will keep us from doing those things. We'll have the discernment. We'll be able to make better decisions and recognize these things when they come into our lives. To deliver thee from the strange woman. I find it funny. Who's writing this again? A man who's had 1,000 women in his life.
Adulteress.
Adulteress, okay. Strange women, or that's what he means is adulteress. Even from the stranger which flattereth with her words. I'm sure he heard a lot of that throughout his life with all these ladies he had going on. Which forsaketh the guide of her youth, and forgetteth the covenant of her God. It's amazing that he was definitely guilty of what he's writing about. He learned the hard way. You know, and these are some things we can learn from his mistakes. For her house inclineth unto death, and her paths unto the dead. None that go unto her return again. Whew, that's a big statement. Neither take they hold of the paths of life, that thou mayest walk in the way of good men, That's the point. That's the goal. And keep the paths of righteousness. So again, having wisdom and knowledge will keep us from all these things and allow us to walk in the way of good men and to keep the paths of righteousness. For the upright, the ones doing what they should do and living according to the way they should, and having the wisdom and discernment and the understanding and knowledge of God, for the upright shall dwell in the land, and the perfect shall remain in it. That tells us there's reward and blessing with making the right choices, making the right decisions. Anybody want to share or testify that that is true or not true? I've had times in my life where I went a froward direction, and I certainly was not dwelling well in my land of my life. So once you get your life on track towards God, focusing on Him, putting Him first in all things, that makes all the difference in the world. But again, what does Proverbs mean?
Proverbs means any piece of wisdom.
Any piece of wisdom.
Comparison.
The comparison. So here's the comparison in chapter 2. It's given us, this is what you should do, but verse 22 says, the wicked shall be cut off from the earth.
If you don't.
If you don't, exactly. If you don't do what you're supposed to do, you'll be cut off from the earth, and the transgressors shall be rooted out of it. It's a lot of good stuff here in chapter 2, and a lot of things that we can apply in our lives today. And now we have no excuses. And we say, man, I wish I was closer to God. Well, you just need to move closer to Him. You need to take action and use these action words and apply it in your life so that we can move forward. Just to give you a little taste of chapter 3, he's going to continue in the same lines of, my son, forget not my law, but let thy heart keep my commandments. So he's going to continue to encourage. We won't get into it today because there's 35 verses. We'll cover that next week. But he's going to continue through chapter 3 to talk about the things that we ought to do, the things that will keep us on the right path. Anybody want to share anything that you've kind of learned or that's really stood out to you through chapter 2 so far, or even chapter 1 that's helped you? Hopefully there's been at least one thing.
And we got to hunt for it.
We got to hunt for it. That's right. Anybody got anything else? We'll go ahead and go a little bit early today, but it's fine.
Yeah, but you also said, answered the question why Jesus came.
Yeah,
You know, people, that's something you always get into when you're talking to someone that's not a
absolutely.
Christian.
Yeah.
Well, you know, why did he come? Why did he do that?
Yeah.
Luke 19.
Luke 19:10, to seek and to save that which is lost. That's good stuff.
I was looking at the biblical meaning of righteousness.
Okay.
It says in its deeper spiritual meaning, righteousness is the quality of being right in the eyes of God, including character, which is your nature, your conscience, which is your attitude, conduct in your action, and command by your word.
Wow.
It's a lot to feel.
That is. That's a lot. It's a high bar to jump over.
I also find it interesting to add to that, like, we use the term self-righteousness, like
Right.
describing other people as like they're stuck in their ways, they're all about themselves,
Right.
and they think they're all high and mighty. And
They're
So-
always right.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
They're
like
always
the-
right. Nobody else is ever right.
Yeah, but if you remove the word self and apply it to the Bible, you're
Right.
not of yourself, you're submitting to God, and you're completely ignoring yourself and just
Absolutely.
fixated on God.
Righteousness is really the opposite of self-righteousness.
Yeah.
And self-righteousness is really what do they call that, an oxymoron, where it's like you're really not right if you're all about yourself. You never will be. That's one thing that I've learned in my life, and I know a lot of people have. All right, well, we'll shut this thing down online, and we'll see you guys next week as we get into chapter 3.